Imagine if each morning when you wake up, you're smiling and looking forward to your day, knowing you are happy even while you're dealing with grief and loss. The Grief and Happiness podcast inspires, comforts, and supports you with each new episode. I'm Emily Zero-Threat, welcoming you to explore with me your life of endless possibilities. Aloha. We're so happy to have you here on our podcast today. And I have a very special guest who, when I lived on the mainland, lived not too far away from me. So it's amazing how we keep making connections kind of all over the planet with doing this podcast. And it's nice to meet somebody from that area in California. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Emily. It's really nice to be here.
Kim has a book that she wrote that has come out called hopefully I'll say it right, Where the Yellow Flowers Grow.
Where Yellow Flowers Bloom. Where Yellow Flowers
bloom. Okay, I was close.
And you're in a nice yellow sweater today, so that's perfect.
Yes,
you planned that well.
Yeah, I did. I did that on purpose. And I loved the yellow flowers. It was so special. From the beginning, I kept saying, okay, what yellow flowers have to do with this? But it was so beautiful toward the end when you discovered what yellow flowers had to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about you and your situation and why you wrote the book?
Sure. So I was living the dream in Santa Barbara with my family in Montecito, and my husband and I both worked. We had careers in medical device sales and marketing, and we had two lovely children, a boy and a girl. My son was 17, my daughter was 14. We had a handsome Irish setter dog who was goofy and fun, and we were very involved in the community and our kids' extracurricular activities. And there had been a very large wildfire. At the time, it was called the largest wildfire in California history, and it was called the Thomas Fire. And it roared from Ventura toward Santa Barbara. And I heard a statistic, it was burning an acre a second, and it was just combustion. And we evacuated 3 times. So our December was listening to our phones. They have a warning system on it that sounds like an Amber Alert. And it would alert when you had to evacuate. And we did that 3 times. We went to south of Ventura, south of where you were, went to Thousand Oaks, to my girlfriend's house. And it was the holidays that didn't happen, right? Everyone was evacuated. Mailboxes had tape around them, so nothing could be delivered. When you got back, it looked covered like snow with ash. The driveway, the pool was sooty. In the house you walked in, and there was ash everywhere, in the cabinets, on the glasses. And so, it was really, tiring and scary. And the firemen did heroic efforts to save the community and the houses that could have just all gone away. But then what happened in January, so if you imagine that hillside is all denatured, all the vegetation's off it now, right? And there's downed 100-year-old trees, and there's car-sized boulders sitting precariously up on the hillside. And we weren't on the hillside. We were down in the village and in the community. That's where our house was. So there was forecasting heavy rain, and we kept watching our aware and beware, what we should do. Are we in the evacuation zone? What does that mean? And we put our sandbags out, and we had a plan. We'd go to a hotel if it rained heavy. And at about 3:30 in the morning or 3 in the morning, we woke up to heavy rain, my husband and I. He went to look on the house, and, the book details all the details of this quite vividly, but we didn't make it out in time of the house, because what we didn't know what was happening is the mountain gave away with the heavy rains, and it became like a slip and slide. And so those car-sized boulders and those 100-year-old trees came roaring, slipping, sliding down the mountain because I think there was ash that was, a couple feet deep, and it was just a slip and slide. And it came coming down the creek. Well, the creek got jammed up. There was underpasses and boulders hitting boulders jammed up. And there was a curve in the creek across the lane from us. And what a neighbor saw was a 30-foot plume of boulders and debris and mud plume up to the sky, and then crash down on our house and our neighbor's house with my family in it, and it obliterated it. And my husband and son perished. So did the dog. My daughter was washed away about a football field distance and ended up buried alive for 6 hours under 20 feet of mud and a couple cars, a transformer, electrical wires, part of her roof. But miraculously, she had a little bit of air pockets by her mouth and nose, and she was able to breathe. And I was washed away 2 football fields, and I was found wrapped in electrical wires, injured on a debris pile in an intersection. So it was the night of the unimaginable.
I can't imagine experiencing that. My heart really goes out to you. Yeah, there's nothing like it with all the experiences that any of us have been in. This had such a magnitude of so many different things happening at the same time, so much loss at the same moment. And in your book, I was so impressed by your fortitude that you were able to move forward and do what you felt needed to be done for you. And the way the community came together, and
the community was incredible. They weren't just grief tourists, that pop in and then pop out because they're uncomfortable with it. This community, strangers I didn't know, rallied. People were out looking for my son was designated as missing along with a 2-year-old little girl. So there was 23 people that died that night, 11 of which were children. And of 21 people were recovered, 2 were listed as missing, and 1 was my 17-year-old son, and 1 was a beautiful baby girl, Lydia, who was 2.
Yes. Well, I was very impressed by the impact that your son and your husband had on the community with the things that they did with scouting and with the special project.
Basketball. The Eagle Scout project. He refurbished a elementary school playground in a underfunded school, and he just brought it back to life. And that was really meaningful for him. It was meaningful. He's got his Eagle Scout award or project because of it. But what was most meaningful is he had just been doing it all Easter weekend. And it was a grueling, long project because they had to, sand down all the 8 basketball backboards, paint it cobalt blue. Then he bought a stencil for a dolphin and paint the posts, school bus yellow. So it just brightened up the whole playground. And a little boy came up to him at the end, and he was just exhausted, and Jack's hands were all covered in white paint. And the little boy looked up at him, and he must have looked like a big teenager. Jack was 15 at the time. And he said, "Thank you for making my school pretty again." And that really moved Jack because he wanted these kids. He knew. He drove by their school every day and realized, why does that school not have the resources that my school has? So he saw the inequity of it. And what was so beautiful is he chose his project to help give it a little bit of a facelift.
It was beautiful. One thing I really liked about your book was the color pictures in it. And it was really wonderful to see the color picture of that basketball court and think about how much fun it would be for the kids to have that to play there.
Yeah. They felt, and they wrote them letters. So the 5th graders were so thrilled with their school that, they all wrote them thank you notes. And the gist was, thank you for making us proud of our school. Because if they would play other schools, they'd come over and play a game. And it just gave them kind of school pride. And Jack's friend Bram, asked him about it. And Jack said, why is everyone making a big deal of it? And it had been on the news. So he did get some nice recognition. He goes, they just needed it fixed, and I fixed it for him. So he was pretty humble in his approach to it.
Yeah, your whole family sounds just wonderful. All the description, everybody. You have friends, and you're kind, and people are kind to you, and it sounds like such a wonderful place to live. And one thing I was really impressed about your husband was his contribution to the Scouts, being a Scout leader, and how it was his troop that had 100% Eagle Scouts.
Yeah. So what happened was we moved from Ohio, and in Ohio, scouting's really big, and in Montecito, there's just not as many kids. So they have Troop 33 is the I think, the second oldest scout troop in Santa Barbara area. But it had dwindled down to 2 scouts just because people weren't talking about it. And then there was a mom, Jamie Ruffing, who really started getting the Cub Scouts going, and there was nice little packs of Cub Scouts. And so when we moved here, we went to a meeting, and the women saw Dave, and they came up to me and they said, "Do you think he could be our scoutmaster?" Because they saw Dave totally engage in it. He would like the Pinewood Derby. He liked, he was a natural leader, and you could tell he found it fun. And I said, "Sure, ask him." And so they scurried on over to him, and they said, "Would you be our Cub Scout leader?" And he said, "I'd be honored." And so he did that, and then matriculated when the boys went from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts. He became the scoutmaster, and he really dedicated himself to reinvigorate the troop that goes down to 2, and then it came up to like 14 or 16, and now it's well over 20. But 100% of those young boys who started with him became Eagle Scouts, and that's very unusual. Only 4% of people who go into scouting get to Eagle Scout, and for all of them to do that was such a moving thing to see. Some of them did it when Dave was alive, and some of them did it soon after his death.
It just was so beautiful that there's such power in what young men learn from Scouts and from becoming an Eagle Scout. That's really an accomplishment.
And women can do it now. It's just scouting. So, and there's women Eagle Scouts now. And I was a Girl Scout leader and involved in the Scouts with Jack. I was with Girl Scouts. And I got to tell you, how the Scouts prepare these kids with the different things they can learn and merit badges, and then go to a board to present what they've learned. It's really good training for if they go into the workplace, that they do the work, they have to go to a board to present, and they get to explore what their interests are. I was pretty impressed by the format.
Yeah, it's amazing that's the sort of thing that I think there should be a place in school where kids could learn that. And it just seems to be something that's not part of the curriculum anyplace.
You're right. And when Jack went to that underfunded school and the 5th graders, he came in his uniform, and many of them, lived under the poverty level, and they'd never seen a Scout and what that was. And they just saw his whole stash of badges, and they wanted to ask him, what was your favorite one? And he said scuba diving. And they were just so intrigued that there was a program where someone could go learn scuba diving, or could go learn first aid, or whatever it was. Yeah. I wish our young people got a little bit more life learning stuff.
Well, fortunately, those boys all did. That's really great. And I'm so impressed with your daughter too. When I was first thinking about her was when you were saying she was walking outside practicing. I dreamed a dream for Les Mis, singing that. And I used to have a live theater, and we did one of the first 3 productions of the kind of pared down version of Les Mis that they put out for young people to be able to do at my theater. And I'm very attached to that show. And I thought, oh, that just sounds so beautiful for somebody her age to be able to have that opportunity and that voice. And then she had the opportunity to really use her voice through this whole experience that you were going through.
Yeah, she really did. She sang when she was buried alive to keep herself sane. And then after she recovered, got out of the hospital, there was a lot of fundraisers because there was so much devastation. The freeway was closed for 10 days. 400 homes were destroyed, 150 people injured. So many people lost their jobs. Restaurants were closed. It was just a really awful time. And so people like Katy Perry did a benefit concert locally, and Ellen DeGeneres and Brad Paisley. And so she was fortunate. They wanted her to come sing. And so she got to sing on stage with Katy Perry, the first verse of Firework, which talks about being buried alive. And she sang on stage, where Brad Paisley was. And then at the Kick-Ash Bash with David Foster, she did the national anthem. And then she sang on Ellen, because Ellen is a neighbor in town, and was really a standout. She, it was rumored, I was in the hospital, but it was rumored she was biking with her wife, Portia, around the area to seeing who needed help, and was really showing some kindness there. And so everyone wanted Lauren's story. She was the miracle mud princess, right? That emerged okay out of her entombment. And all the media wanted that story. And I wanted to protect Lauren from that. It was going to be her story on her time and with whom she wanted to share it, if she wanted to share it. And she met Ellen. She's like, I think I'd like to share it with Ellen. So Ellen had us on her show. And that was the first time people heard a little bit of Lauren's story. And in the book, it's her first, she gives her firsthand account of what happened up until the slide and what was going on for her, buried alive, and then when she heard the rescuers. So it's pretty compelling.
Yes, it is. It was wonderful how the celebrities there's something about celebrity that appeals to people that can draw a lot of support in, and for the celebrities to step up and be able to do that, like Kenny Loggins. And
he was a standout. He helped a teen sing benefit. He helped it, and she sang "Defying Gravity." And he has kids of his own, and he's just a kind man, and he likes to mentor the young up and coming singers. And he sang, the song that I put Jack to bed with from when he was born until probably age 7, because he loved it so much, was Kenny's song. His CD "Return to Pooh Corner," Winnie the Pooh songs, and so Kenny recorded Lauren and him doing the duet so that we could play that at Jack's service, which was more than moving, right? It was more than moving. That was a song that was new motherhood to me with my son. And it was the song that soothed my son for 7 years going to sleep.
I was just, when you said that, it reminded me about Stitch.
Jack he liked Lilo and Stitch. He loved Stitch.
And I didn't, before I read the book, the Grief and Happiness Alliance that I am part of has a nonprofit organization that does things for fundraising and to pay for everything so people don't have to pay for their help with grief. And so they've been coming up with different ways to do services for people. And one of the things that we have a young woman who's, I think, 22 in our group, who said, let's have a movie night and do a pop culture sort of thing. And I said, well, that's great, but it costs a whole lot of money to get rights. And so she researched and figured out a way that she could have people not necessarily watch the movie together, but then they come together and discuss it afterwards. And the first movie that she's doing is Lilo and Stitch. She said that could appeal to the young people, and they could talk about grief and things from that movie. So it just that to have that Stitch in the book, and then in what I was doing right at that moment when I had never really thought about Lilo and Stitch before, I thought that was kind of an
He's
interesting
a cute
coincidence.
Little character. He's a cute character, right?
And then you gave his friends the Stitch to go.
Yeah. So, when Jack was 1 is when he got his first plush doll Stitch. And I just picked it up for him. Didn't really think much of it, but he really, really connected with that. That was his stuffed animal. And even it was still in his closet. And if there was a tough day, even probably when he was 15, he'd take it out, lay on his bed with it, maybe chew on its ears, right? Stitch was comforting for Jack. So when he had a nice friend network, and they were just so taken aback with his death, all of a sudden he didn't come back to class, and he was just kind of like missing, just the kid's not in his desk anymore. And it was their first experience for many of them with death. And then someone their age, like, that shouldn't happen. And so when they went off to college, I wanted to get them something to take to college. And so I got them each a Stitch doll. And so these 19 or 20-year-olds are heading off to their university, and they're bringing Stitch with them.
That's so cool. Another thing that I was really impressed with was the quilt that you made of
thank you.
Your guys. Their silhouette after scuba diving. Beautiful quilt. There's, again, a beautiful color picture in the book. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I enjoy quilting. Actually, I credit my son for that. We were on a camping trip, and everyone was going jet skiing, but he had a ear infection. So I took him into town on Main Street, and we got 2 scoops of ice cream. And across the street from the ice cream shop, an old-fashioned ice cream shop, was a cute little quilting shop. And I didn't quilt, but my girlfriend did. And I said, hey, Jack, let's just stroll in there. I just kind of, want to look around. And I got a book of how to quilt. I got a little stack of starter fabric that was all in a set, and I said, I'm just going to try it out and learn maybe on YouTube, read this book. And I then really, that was my creative outlet, making quilts. And so Dave was an avid scuba diver. Jack had just learned it in the Scouts, and they were on Catalina doing their first dive together. And someone snapped that picture. And I said, I'm going to make Dave a couple quilts. One was this ocean one with the silhouette of Dave and Jack on it. Another one was more of a green and browns of the scouting colors of the coastal oaks and the hiking stuff. And that was his Christmas gift one year, were those two quilts. And when we evacuated from the Thomas fire, and we just had to grab a couple things that were most important to us, Dave grabbed, and as I looked in the back of his car when he got to my friend's house, he grabbed our wedding portrait that was on the wall, and he grabbed the quilt. And that really moved my heart, that's what he brought, of things that he felt were irreplaceable.
Yeah, just beautiful. It shows the value and importance of creating memories and things that can go along. Another thing that really moved me is something I hadn't really thought that much about: intuition or getting signs. Yeah, intuitives. And you met a whole bunch.
Oh my gosh. I had done in my life before, and I could just turn sideways a little bit and hit one. So many people, we're all gifted with different talents, right? Some people are good mathematicians. Some people are good locksmiths. Some people get communication abilities that maybe you and I don't have. And there were two missing children, and some very reputable, kind-hearted intuitives reached out because they wanted to help, and they didn't want to charge a dime. This was playing bigger. This was for a grieving moms, Lydia's mom and I. And it was to find children that were missing. So yeah, I did meet some, and so that gave me that experience of that, learning about that. And it was actually a great part of my grief management, because in it, I was talking to them. It's like, okay, where's the clue? Where's Jack? Right? We were looking for 3 years for him. And his remains, they didn't reveal themselves right away. And so I wanted the clues. Jack, where are you? Where are you? Are you near this house? Are you near this creek? Whatever. And he goes, it doesn't quite work like that. But he goes, I know I'll be found. God told me I'll be found. Pieces of me will be found. And that's what he said. But what I learned from the intuitive readings, or what I took from them, is I took that we're more than our physical bodies, that I believe the soul transitions to a frequency that our human eyes can't see. And I believe my husband and son are in pure joy, and my dog, they're all in pure joy as spirit. And they're around us, can't see them. But that's what helped me a lot in my grief, because who wouldn't want to know your loved ones aren't in pure joy, right? That's a pretty nice thing to think about.
It really is.
We got taxes to think about. We got other things in life here. And they're pure. They don't have that. They're pure joy.
And with that, we said he was missing for 3 years, and you did so much searching, and so many different people helped with the search. And I was amazed at the things that you were recovering in the search. You'd think that the things they wouldn't still be there, that they couldn't possibly be there.
There's still mud. They didn't take things down to grade. It's so expensive, right? To haul mud. It's heavy, it's expensive, it's time consuming. So every time it rains, I could go out there after a heavy rain and stuff will still reveal itself. It could be a spoon. It could be, a saucer that you used in the kitchen, stuff, clothes. There was Lauren's burgundy. We had been near this one part of the creek over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for a year. And after one rain, there it was. It was her burgundy Christmas dress at the base of the tree. It just, enough mud moved away, and there it was. And then they say actually bones can move up and reveal themselves. So yeah, there's still probably a lot of stuff out there.
And especially that beautiful quilt that you talked about with the silhouette on it that you
Yeah,
made
we found
for
that.
to come up.
Yeah. It was wedged between a chain link fence and the sidewall of the creek, about 20 feet down. My friend Anne was going in there. She's like, there's this clump of something. She's like, it's a quilt. And it came out. It was about 50 pounds of clumped hard on mud. And we laid it out. And we're like, that's the quilt.
Wow. That's just so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a journey you've been through. And I think it's wonderful that you decided to share it. Because I think the magnitude of what happened, people we've been having so many weather events and things happening, just tons of them. And I don't know whether we're just hearing about them a whole lot more, but it seems like there actually are a whole lot more. I know there's a lot more fires in California.
Well, there's certainly more media coverage of them. I don't know if there's more, or it seems like there's more, but there's, the TV, the news is on it all the time. So you hear about them, right? And it's pretty scary stuff.
And through your book, you're able to give a perspective of what it's like to actually go through something like that.
Yeah, the human impact. The human impact. When you hear about these things on the news, nothing could happen to you. This happens to other people in other parts of the country. And then why couldn't it happen to you? It happened to us. And we weren't expecting it. Right.
And what we hear when we hear the news most of the time is how many acres were burned or how many houses were destroyed, and we don't hear about the people so much. And your book just put a personal people aspect of it that I think it's really good for people to recognize that happens.
Yeah.
So, well, this has been a wonderful talk. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners?
Well, if they're, I hope if they are going through a challenging time, or, if they're interested in getting the book, they can get it on Amazon, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom. And, I've gotten feedback from those who've read it, those who've gone through grief, saying it helped get them access to their grief. So they found it beneficial that way. Other people, they've been reading it in like 2 days, 3 days, because it doesn't read like a memoir. It reads like, I think, more of an action, suspense, fast-paced, fictional narrative. It reads like a fictional narrative because it's unbelievable what happens. Or if someone's just, I had a girlfriend, she didn't have grief, but she just says, I look at life a little differently now. Having seen what can happen and what does happen. So I just, if it helps someone, if even it helps one person, I'm glad I did it. That's what it's for. It's the only reason I did it. You got to find meaning in what happened. And if this can help me do this and write this book that maybe can help one or two people, it puts purpose behind the unimaginable.
Yeah, my main thing that I do to help people with grief, there are two things. One is teach them different happiness practices and ways they can use that, but to spend a lot of time with writing, because you can write about lots of different kinds of things. The group that I have that meets on Sundays, we write on something that's supportive to them every week, and it's different every week, and they're always kind of surprised, and they like writing and then being able to talk about it right as soon as they write it. And it's been really positive to help them deal with their grief by writing about it. And you had a really big situation and you wrote a really big thing for it. And I think it really helps.
It does. Because you know why? As I wrote it, I just wrote it at first thinking, I got to get it down so I don't forget it for my grandkids if I have them one day. But then as I went through it, it became reflective. I saw my initial stages of desperate grief. And then I saw it change a little bit to more peaceful adaptation and integration. I was so desperate to find the remains of my son, so feverish to do that at the beginning, almost manic, right? And then I got less attached. I wanted to find them, to bury them, I did, but I got less attached to the outcome because with the intuitives, I realized, Jack kept saying, it's just a shell, it's just a shell. And I'm like, dude, I need your shell back, right? This is my baby boy. But I got more comfortable in that. I got more comfortable in it because I'm like, yeah, their spirits are in pure joy. I do want something to bury. I do. but I saw the reflective healing that I was kind of going through, I think.
Yeah, I really, writing is very therapeutic, and I'm glad you were able to use it that way. That's really beautiful. And it is, I couldn't put the book down once I started. I read a lot of books for my podcast. When I interview authors, I always like to read their book ahead of time. And with this one, I picked it up and I thought, I'm just not being able to do anything else here. And this just gets done.
People told me that. People told I started and then I went to bed at 2 a.m. once I finished it. Like they just plow, because it goes in, here's firsthand accounts of the mudslide, right? What's it like to live through it? Then Lauren's first account. And then this search for Jack, and you're like, all these things that happen, and then like, when are we going to get there? You know, so it's people have told me that they like the pace of it.
Yeah, it's really good. And you were able to, it seemed to me anyway, that you were able to get everything in there that you needed to get in there to make it work for you, to express what you were setting out to express.
Yeah, I do think so.
Just beautiful.
Thank you.
In the show notes, there will be the information about Kim and where you can get the book, and you can get a hold of that. And I highly recommend it. It's a very, very interesting book.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm sure that people are going to get a lot out of this podcast, and I appreciate you doing that.
You're welcome. Take care now.
Okay. And we'll see you next week. Do you want more comfort, support, and happiness? Join the Grief and Happiness Alliance. Visit my website at lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com and read my book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, rate it, review it, and binge on all our episodes on grief and happiness. I can't wait to welcome you back to another episode.